Well, hello, my friends. Are you ready to delve into Zionism? I'm interested in this now because of the war in Israel. And, obviously, for a long time now, been hearing about Zionism. I've been aware of Zionism for a long time, but right now it's kind of out there. And so maybe a lot of people haven't really thought about it much. If you're not one of those 55 million Christian Zionists in the United States, maybe you don't know much about it. Or maybe if you are a particular flavor of Zionist in the United States, Christian Zionist, maybe you didn't realize how many different Zionisms there are. Obviously, if you're a scholar or a leader in some church and a Zionist, then you're aware of the varieties of Zionism because they collaborate and work together quite often. They meet different religious organizations and they discuss the topic. What should we do? And, who's right and who's wrong. A lot of these meetings, and if you read that book that I suggested, you'll really learn a lot about it. It's very fascinating. It's a great read. So anyhow, before I get started, I was watching the Analysis News with Paul Jay. He's an old timer, kind of left-leaning journalist, independent journalist. I think he's a good journalist anyway. Might not be your cup of tea, but he's talking with Adolph L. Reed Jr., who I'll read a little bit about him. He's was born in 1947. He's an American professor emeritus of political science at the University of Pennsylvania, specializing in studies of issues of racism in U.S. politics. He has taught at Yale, Northwestern, and the New School for Social Research, and he has written on racial and economic inequality. He is a contributing editor to The New Republic and has been a frequent contributor to The Progressive, The Nation, and other left-wing publications. He is a founding member of the U.S. Labor Party. Labor, wow. I mean, you don't hear about that much unless you're a Starbucks worker, an Amazon warehouse person, or somebody who's trying to get a better pay package and benefits package, and you have a union and so on. Most of that's been busted, unions, the labor movement, a long time ago. I think, like I've said many times, talking about AI and technology and accelerationism and capitalism and whatever, the game is up. Capitalism has produced, in particular, neoliberal fossil fueled capitalism, a great deal of externalities and calamities for the world, while at the same time making the Northern Hemisphere, Japan and South Korea and America and Canada and Europe, fairly wealthy and materialistic. Consumerism is a big thing now, global supply chains. It's amazing just how many parts of whatever you have come from so many different countries around the world. Not just the raw materials, the commodities, but parts, nuts and bolts. And then they get assembled somewhere, then they get shipped to the United States, then you can buy them at Walmart or whatever. And it's all very exciting because, home improvement and whatnot. It's a lot of fun. We're not going to give up any of that. So we're going to ride this climate catastrophe train into the granite wall. And come what may, we'll see what happens. I often wonder if young people are going to step up and do something to boot out all these old geezers, baby boomers and younger leaders from their 40s. People have sold out. People are part of the system that we love and revere so much. and say, no, no, it's time for something different. And by the way, that would have to be global. So the Sahel in Africa and India, Pakistan, all over the world, people would have to kind of come together. You think that's going to happen? I have my doubts. But anyway, Adolf is Professor Reed is a lefty and a labor guy, so U.S. Labor Party. Just imagine, I mean, with AIs and Chat GPT-4 and all these other, the arms race around the world for artificial intelligence and, technology, robotics, everything. Moving very quickly, advancing very fast. And most people just don't know what to think about any of it. At some point, do you think anybody in charge of the game, playing the game, the great game of 0 to 1 capitalism, do you think monopoly capitalism, do you think any of these people give a damn about laborers? They don't care. You get scammed into joining a company because they offer you stock options and then they pay you like shit, treat you like garbage. They don't care about you, really. But we need jobs. We got to pay the rent and pay off the car and do things for our families and friends and try to have a nice life. So we have to go along with it. And if we speak out against it, we're in danger of losing our status, position, job, whatever. So I understand why people, want to keep their opinions on the down low and not be too vociferous about their ideas, thoughts, and feelings. But maybe young people will rise up and say we have to find a better way. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they're just too caught up in all of it. So along this line, in this conversation that we're talking about AI and the right wing, Paul Jay was saying the right wing knows how to use AI to propagandize, to raise money, to do all these things. And I've read several articles this morning where, there was hand-waving freakoutery about Iranian AIs and Chinese and North Korean and African. Just name some country that America hates. And they're so much more advanced. So you're back to this Schmachtenberger thing of multipolar traps and Thucydides traps and arms races and so on. And so who's going to gain control? And, we know that America is the most propagandized to culture, community, population in the whole world. I mean, they wrote the book, literally. I've talked about that many times, but, PR, advertising, nudge, all these ideas come right out of the U.S., which is obsessed with this stuff. You have to have GDP growth, so you have to make more stuff, and so you have to sell more stuff, and you have to get people, behind the system, and you have to make markets for everything. As I said yesterday, make a market for metabolic diseases and stuff, so that some people can profit, and we can all live these lavish lives, and nobody's going to take a haircut. You're not going to ask American capitalism to take a haircut like banks have to do sometimes when they're writing off their debt or bad deals or whatever. We're not going to do it. We're not going to give up one thing because we're too used to it. And we take it all for granted. And like I say all the time, most of this technology and even political philosophy or anything you want to think about is a black box to most people. So these, AIs are going to get much, much better. People who play the game, who have the resources and the power, are going to use these tools to better their position in the game. They don't really care about you. What they're going to do is just placate you and try to, like Simone Weil said, just try to pacify, people, keep them And I read another article, heartbreaking, about a guy I follow, was at Oxford, and just how, and Chris Hedges commented on this a decade ago, but how the university system is just there to pacify, to control the ideas, so the kids come along and they want to change things. So they get ahead of it, ahead of the game, so that they can keep everybody pacified and keep everyone from becoming radicalized. So on all sides of this story, the other side has the advantage. So we have to work harder. They understand propaganda better than we do, so we have to work harder to use it properly, to win the game. They have better AIs, they know how to use it. And we, all of us, are just stupid idiots who can't figure out anything. We have no agency, no maturity, no ability to think for ourselves, no opportunities to make any choices. We're just dumbasses, right? So we have to be protected from information. We have to be controlled. We have to be nudged. We have to be influenced. Because we're helpless. We're just hopeless people. It's kind of grotesque. It's such a nasty way to think about human beings. We have more potential than that. We are individuals. We can make choices. We do have power, but we have to organize with one another to do something with it. And we have to decide what we want to do. And it's going to be very hard with the coordination problems and the meta crisis to gather together in groups and decide what needs to be done and how we're going to do it. What do you want? Why do you want it? How are you going to get it? And we have to have those conversations. And that's another thing that really bothers me. Everybody's online having the conversation. And so there's all these conversations, but nobody's doing anything. Nobody's going to sacrifice an hour of their week to doing anything. I'm not fucking standing on a soapbox acting like I'm any better than anybody else. I'm just as frozen as we all are. What am I going to do? Go to Caldas and ask my retired friends from around the world and my local friends to get together and figure out a way to get Portugal to do something. American leaders, UK leaders, European leaders, the really powerful people in Russia, China, in India, in Pakistan, around the world, have to be convinced to do things differently. We have to change the mind of the leadership to get anywhere. And we have to push them. We have to make them afraid of us. And not in this cry-bullyism kind of way where all these rich and powerful people, when anyone pushes back against them, they just, I've been bullied. I'm scared. These people were protesting. They had a sit-in. I couldn't get into my office. It was horrific. You have to look at Citations Needed podcast and some of the articles that they write in The Nation and whatnot and see just how absurd that is, right? These billionaire players who have all the resources to do whatever they want can go out there and pretend they're victims. I watched the whole Trump speech or whatever you call it at Trump Tower where all his fans were clapping. The amount of bullshit he was spewing was phenomenal, stupendous, unbelievable. And people just sit there and listen to it. It's mind-boggling. So he's a victim. The system's rigged. Migrants are pouring across at open borders. It's just nonsense. And migrants have taken over all the luxury hotels. Well, other people, nice people, can't golf because there's tents on the golf course and so on and so forth. It's just absurd. And that's where we're at. We're going to vote for a Democratic Party and leadership that's idiotic. These people make mistake after mistake geopolitically and diplomatically over and over again. The definition of insanity. And we don't hold them to account. We actually believe, it is absolutely true that the CIA gets wet all the time. They're running around the planet. All these dark military organizations, the deep state, whatever, the security state, all those agencies are messing with governments all over the world, even our allies. Remember that thing that happened in Germany with Angela Merkel and so on. And the French hate the CIA, and the CIA hate French intelligence. You have Mossad running around, and everybody's messing with everything. And it's just absurd and crazy, and it leads to war. And then we get to a situation where let's escalate this thing because we're desperate. We can't win. So we got to escalate at the war, and then hopefully we'll just nuke the place. We have our bunkers, so we'll survive, and then we'll repopulate the world with our robots and whatnot. It's so dystopian and ridiculous. But even though it sounds insane and absurd, it's kind of what's going on in the world. It blows my mind every day, and sometimes it just makes me sick to my stomach. I just get knots thinking about it. And we do seem so helpless, so unable to do anything about it. And it just bothers me. you know, I wish I could not give a shit. I'm trying. Delete everything, get rid of Facebook, get offline, and just say, fuck it. I'll wait until I get cancer or have a stroke or something. You know, make some superhero movies or something, some dystopian miniseries for Netflix, another zombie series. How exciting would that be? But yeah, it's crazy. And the finger pointing and the othering and the scapegoating and all the typical shit that we've been doing forever. And all these perturbations and stratagems and excitations and bullshit we've done all over the world for decades have never turned out well. And nobody counts the body count of Uncle Sam, his gangster behavior. Nobody fucking does that. It's everybody else is the evil one, right? What have the Chinese done to you lately except send products to your fucking Target stores? But we have to be made to believe that they're an existential threat to Americans. You won't be able to buy your monster truck if there are Chinese people in the world. I remember what Europe was like before the war started in Ukraine, okay? Okay, whatever. Who started it, I know you are, but what am I? Okay, forget all that. People were trading. Ukraine was doing well. Kyiv was a nice progressive city. The oil and gas was flowing, the energy, Germany was doing well. Europe was coming out of the 2008 disaster swimmingly. Portugal and Greece and other countries were getting back on their feet. People were traveling. You'd see Russians traveling and you'd see Chinese people traveling, and everybody was kind of happy. And then, of course, we had to have color revolutions all over the place because they're just not freaking American enough. And we have to do something about that because we've been conditioned to hate Russians so much. That's why I read that book, Creating Russophobia. It's a fascinating book, and it starts way back in history. There are so many reasons for this, right? But do we really want to go back to the Middle Ages and so on? My friend commented on the last video that, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and that type of thing. Absolutely. But there was a time in the 2000s, early 2000s, I was thinking we were all getting better at our critical thinking faculties and so on. And now we're just bouncing back to magical thinking. I mean, these advertisements for quantum jumping on YouTube, why are they targeting me with that? It's like you have all these like dark matter series on Netflix or whatever where, people are like, there's two guys living, they swapped lives, it's like parallel universes. And I talked about that riding my bike. It's like when I go to the quantum jump, I always meet the president, Stephen, and I meet, you know, uh, Academy Award winning Stephen, and I meet the greatest bouillontees of all time. I never like go quantum jump and then ask the guy, the crack addict Stephen, what's it like to be sleeping in an alley in Chicago or something like that, because God knows I'm so damn smart and special. Yeah. So anyway, we got to get a handle on this because we're really a nanosecond from midnight here. And if we dodge a bullet and these wars end, the big ones, the really damaging ones, and we can get our shit together a little bit and bring back some stability to the world, just a little bit, then we get to ride the climate change train to disaster, because we're not going to do anything about that. And I think the players of the great game are starting to realize that their game is up, like it's about to end, like Schmachtenberger says. In game theory, it's just about strategy, and when somebody wins the game is over. So you watch a football match, and when somebody scores more goals and the time is out, 90 minutes is up, one side won and the other side lost, and the game is over. And then you get ready to play the next game. Well, our life on this planet isn't a game. It's just not a sport. Well, there's geopolitics is a blood sport, but are we really thinking about the game ending? So the game has to change, and Schmachtenberger and people like that talk about infinite games, sustainable games. You come up with all your consultant speak, new terminology, and be all eloquent and profound with your new PowerPoint slides and whatnot, and memorize your pitch. But it's simply speaking, we just have to live within reason and constraints. And we have to manage our resources better, our soil, our water, everything. And we might have to give up some stuff, I can really envision very efficient cities and rural communities, smaller towns, running quite well. But you can't have earthship houses because it's illegal. You're off grid. You have to be plugged into the system or you're bad. You're nobody. And if we're not constantly giving our data to the machine 24/7, there's something wrong with us, right? We're messed up. We're not doing our part. We're not commodity enough. Anyway, I'll stop there with my rant and ranting. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. It's always the other side is better. Those liberals, man, they really know how to do it. Neo-reactionaries have to get together and start upping our game, Oh, fuck it. Anyway, so we'll go to the Zionist thing for a bit, and I'll try to end it quickly. How long have I been talking so far? What is it? Ooh, 24 minutes. Okay, I'll just do a little piece on that, and then I'll do another one tomorrow. So, renewalist Zionism. Renewalist streams of Christianity with a strong support for the state of Israel and the Jewish people's return to their ancestral homeland. I think America's like, for Zionists, it's a two-state country. So they have loyalty to Israel for religious reasons, mainly. They can have historical narratives and so on, or maybe guilt, European guilt over the Holocaust or something. A lot of different reasons, but generally speaking, that's in the Bible. So, it's an important place, and they have their reasons for believing that, Israel must exist. And they have loyalty to the United States. So, you have two-state loyalty. And then, obviously, America supports Israel to the hilt. And we know that now, beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's not a conspiracy. Israel doesn't control Congress. Congress controls Israel. And they have good reasons, geostrategic reasons to want to be there. You know, he who controls the spice and so on. Uh, you know, we've got to use energy as quickly as possible. And if we were smart, like many Nate Hagen's guests say, we would be using our oil energy to transition to an electric powered world and, you know, developing alternative energy systems. But we'd have to burn a lot of oil to do that. So it's not going away. And then we should be figuring out if we can take carbon out of the atmosphere. How do we do that? Can we create artificial albedo effects and so on to cool the planet? Whatever. And then a lot of people, they're so smart, they tell you that, you know, really, these climate change zealots, you know, they're crazy. They're zealots. Well, yeah, it's a concern because every scientist on the planet, save a few who are idiots, understand it's a real concern, including the U.S. military and so on. But we're not going to do anything about it. It's almost like we want the world to end. You know, it's this eschatology, end times, you know, the destiny of humanity. Look, we're apes. We evolved into big brains for many reasons, maybe partially diet, partially using tools, partially our socialization, and so on and so forth. Homo sapiens became a thing. But like many people have pointed out, for most of our history, there have been very few of us on the planet, and we haven't been like this. So we're a different type of Homo sapien. But I don't go with this Homo Deus bullshit with our Yuval Noah Harari. It makes me sick. We're not gods, not even close. Whatever you think a god is, we're not even close. And we're probably just going to, you know, destroy ourselves. Anyhow, so renewalists, blah, 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 ancestral homeland. So the background on this, renewalist Christianity, this umbrella term encompasses Pentecostal charismatics. I think I did that already. So Christian Zionism is the belief of the return of Jews to the Holy Land and the establishment of the State of Israel are in accordance with biblical prophecy and part of God's plans. So the modern state of Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecies regarding the end times. Now, you may say that, you know, we're so secular now. Most people are nuns, you know, they don't claim to be religious. But religion is making a comeback for many reasons, some of them good reasons. And there are still a lot of people who abide by that. And even if they don't, they have kind of pseudo faux religious ideas about economics and so on. So ideologies can be really, you know, where's the evidence that your ideology works? Milton Friedman, for God's sake. I mean, if you look into it, you know, Chicago School, whatever. It's all biblical prophecy. The Holy Spirit is actively involved in the restoration of Israel. So, you know, you're not going to go against the Holy Spirit, for God's sake. So I made a little note here. How did the Jews survive with everyone out to get them for thousands of years? It's a miracle. Obviously, God wants the Jews to survive. I want the Jews to survive. I have many Jewish friends. Some of my best friends are Jews. I have a cat named Jules. And sometimes, you know, I say, Juju. Anyway, but we could say that. How did the Jews survive? We could say that about many cultures, not just Jewish culture. You know, how did it manage to survive? How did Christianity become a thing? And now we're all cultural Christians because we're Westerners. And it just permeates everything, even if you don't know it. So what? You know, everybody in Japan's a samurai or a ninja or something. because it just permeates everything, wabi sabi and all that kind of stuff. Maybe, but so what? I mean, how did they survive? How did Confucianism manage to survive? How is there still a Chinesey thing in China, for God's sake? I mean, you have these Chinese people with their own culture, and Africa, everywhere else in the world, Hindus. I had a friend who was a lawyer in Mumbai when I was living there, and she was incredibly bright. She had a Ivy League degree, I forget which university, from the States, and you know, a doctorate degree, and obviously she was a lawyer, and on and on. But she was also really into Hinduism and the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, all that stuff. And talking with her about it was profound. I was really appreciating Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and Hinduism. It was incredibly fascinating having her as a friend and talking about that. And I have a lot of respect for it. But there are fanatical Hindus and Muslims and other people around the world, and sometimes their ideas about their tradition, religion, so on, are not as well reasoned and informed as my friends were. And I think there's a lot of value to be gained from reading the Bhagavad Gita or Sun Tzu or, even writings by Morihei Ueshiba, who founded Aikido, even Bruce Lee. But any religious text as well is interesting. Last year, I read the Quran and the Hadith and all that stuff. It was kind of fun reading it. It gave me a sense of the history behind Islam. And it's fascinating. And the more you learn about the history of that region, the more beautiful and fascinating it becomes. And the less you hate them because they're different. Obviously, I don't like fanatics. I don't care what kind of fanatic you are. If you're an extremist, it's scary. It frightens me. So, this group, Nouvell, Christian Zionists, typically supports Israel politically and morally, seeing its existence and prosperity as crucial to God's redemptive plan for the world. They often engage in advocacy and support measures for Israel within their communities and broader political spheres. Now, I forgot the number, but they raise a lot of money in the States to send to Israel for various things every year. And they support a lot of things in Israel. So you have workers and people in the States who can't get health care, and the war on drugs. Why a war on drugs? Because Americans want their drugs. Anyway, rather than helping ourselves, we're helping the state of Israel, the 51st state of the United States, because of the biblical connection, because they're Christian Zionists. So they engage in prayers for Israel, believing that intercessory prayer can influence global events and align with God's will. So yeah, this is the thing, and God's will, or somebody your preacher or somebody knows God's will, and they will tell you what God's will is, and then you can pray on it, and God will intervene. So obviously God's doing good work in Gaza and the West Bank, and has been for decades, hundreds of years, over 100 years, but recently these past decades, since 47 or whatever. And good old Trump put the embassy back in Jerusalem. So, these people think Trump is literally one of God's agents on earth. They have a lot of political activism, obviously. Who was it? Charlotte wrote a book about that, the Washington Prayer Group. Jeff Charlotte, that's a very interesting story. But it's much deeper than Jeff Charlotte's thing. when I look into this Zionism, it's like much, much deeper. I'm not saying that, it's like the elders of Zion or some conspiracy, the Davos crowd, and they're in control. But they are a powerful lobby, a very powerful lobby, and have to be taken seriously. I'm not saying you try to stop them from believing what they believe, but we need to be aware. That's why I always tell people, why don't you want to know what Putin thinks? Putler, for God's sake, man. If he's your enemy, if he's so bad, why wouldn't you want to know about him and his reasons for doing things and so on, and see if you can, diplomatically head this horror off. But no, we don't do that. We don't want to know. We just know he's bad, and Xi Jinping is bad. Vladimir Putin, he's bad, and Joe Biden's good, and Trump's bad, or Trump's good and Joe Biden's bad, or they're going to save the world. God knows. Somebody's going to cut your taxes. You'll be swimmingly happy, elated. So this can include supporting legislation favorable to Israel and opposing anti-Israel measures. Now, there was a law recently passed in the States where you can't criticize Israel. If you do, you're anti-Semitic. That's absurd as hell. It's logically inconsistent and it's madness. But there you go. And we're the greatest, most powerful country in the world. Aren't you happy that America has your back? It freaks me out. So theological foundations of this. So dispensationalist theology, that was a thing. Remember, I read that definition to you about that. But anyway, which divides history into distinct periods, dispensations, those are the periods, and views the current era as one leading up to the second coming of Christ. In this view, the reestablishment of Israel is a key event in the eschatological timeline, so the end of days timeline. Now, if you study the history of Christianity, there have been people pondering the second coming for a long time, and that obviously there's Gnostic traditions and different traditions, mystical traditions that don't think about that, or even mainstream religions that don't focus on that, because it's like, how would you know? We don't know. God will do his thing when God does his thing. But these people strongly believe that maybe tomorrow, the next day, and then the Antichrist is going to take over and run the world for a while. They believe this stuff, and that's a lot of people. Even if you think it's 47 million Americans think like this, that's a lot of people. And the rest, another 47 or 50 million people in America don't think anything, right? So there's that. The thoughtless crowd, what I call the ignorati, the stubbornly, willfully, passionately, ignorant people. They just don't want to know. Stephen, William T., don't talk about these things. I don't want to know. I'm not interested. There's nothing I can do about climate change, so don't talk to me about it. So conventional theology that emphasizes the continuing validity of God's covenants with the Jewish people, contrasting the replacement theology, supersessionism, that posits the church as the new or true Israel. So some people think, Eastern Orthodox, the church is the thing, that community, how it's expressed locally and through your actions, your activities, and so on. So they think, the church is the new Israel. We don't have to think about, the state of Israel and why that came about after World War II with the British Empire on the wane and the struggle to control oil-rich regions in the Middle East. So global influence. Renewalist Zionism is not confined to any single country, but is a global movement. So particularly in the United States with the Charismatics and the Pentecostals, Latin America, Africa, parts of Asia have significant factions that support Israel. So when I was doing business and living in Shanghai, my accountant, who was from, where was she from? I forget. Anyway, a Chinese woman, she was a Christian Zionist going to a Pentecostal church in Shanghai. So all you hear about is like there's no freedom and you can't do religion in China and all that. You know, one of my business partners was a Christian and he just went to like an Anglican church in Shanghai. Shanghainese guy, okay? So it's just not like that. It's bullshit. It's propaganda. Look, I lived there for a decade, over a decade in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing. And, I traveled all over the place. I have driven from Guangzhou to Yunnan, you know. I've seen the damn country from all over the place. And it's just not what you hear about on the news or in the newspapers or whatever. That's all bullshit. It's not a perfect country. No country is, but it's not as bad as you think. And Chinese people don't have it out for you. They like Americans. So anyway, global influence worldwide. Renewalist Zionism is not confined to any single country, but is a global movement, right? So modern renewalist Zionists utilize media extensively. Oh no, they're using the AIs. They have an advantage over us. Secular humanists and science-y type people who like extraordinary evidence have better get good at using AIs and shit, better at propaganda, or we're going to lose to the religionists, to the fanatics. That's the whole thing. So the other side is always more powerful because you have to be afraid of them in order to create enmity and then start to fight the war. So they use media extensively. Well, they have their TV shows and televangelists and have their websites and their YouTube channels, and their PragerU and this kind of stuff. And, people love it. They flock to it. And they're fanatics, just like Musk fans, that's just like, radio, internet, they're out there mobilizing support for Israel. So I'm going to stop here. And then next time I'll talk about Zionisms. So there are a lot of different flavors of Zionisms. There's many different types. And so we want to explore that a little bit. And I'll do that in the next video. I'll let you off the hook at 43 minutes. Oh my God. For my friend who watched, I guess, maybe he did. I appreciate you. Thanks for commenting. Anybody else who sees this video, if you like it, share it or tell somebody. It's going to be an interesting series, I think. And then whatever. We'll see what happens next. But I can't not be super curious about Zionism. Take good care. Have a nice weekend. Boulianti out.